Hey everybody, Justin Worden here, and you are in the Friday hot seat, and I am with Bill Capen. But first, Bill, before we even get started, William Bill. When people go and look at your name on a piece of paper, who are they voting for?
So William is the legal name. So if you are the government and I owe you money, it's William. And otherwise it's Bill Capen.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I know you as Bill, even though your email is William, but we will cross that bridge another time.
Yeah.
But the reason you are here with me today is you have announced your campaign for the SMTA president. You are running against Greg Vance, both very well respected people in the industry. It is the Friday after the first USA presidential election. So it's very funny how we're doing this, even though this isn't going to air for a few more days. But you and I are sitting here on a Friday after the US presidential debate. I'm sorry, the US presidential debate. So I
Yep.
decided, you know what? Maybe I need to be more formal, or do I stick with my fun, snazzy self and just do it the way I do?
I would say do the way you do because I think formal sometimes gets a little bit complex.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure either way, you and I will both do a little bit better job than the nominees for our US president. But all joking aside, let's dig into it. First and foremost, how long have you been associated with the SMTA?
Since 2006. So what is that? About 18 years?
18 years. Okay. All right. Well, you know, we can sit here and we can spend a bunch of time on your resume and your qualifications, but I think you are very well known in the
Yeah.
SMTA. And I'm going to take this conversation a little differently. And I want to focus more on the leadership qualities you possessed, what you're going to bring as a potential president of the SMTA,
Yep.
and where we can make the most improvements to take the SMTA to the next level. Does that sound fair?
That's fair.
All right, perfect. So the first thing I want to talk about is sponsorship. You know, the SMTA has always had a good core group of sponsors, but as the nonprofit continues to grow, there's a higher demand for bringing in more of those marquee sponsors. And that's a challenge that we're facing daily because no one wants to spend any money these days. What really do you think we can do to help improve the sponsorship in the SMTA?
Uh, it's a great question that I think a lot of people have thought about it as, oh, well, we have to, we got to bring it from the business point of view. We got to bring money, money, money. Well, I don't disagree with that statement, but you also have to bring technical content that people want to hear. And if you don't bring technical content, you're not going to bring people, so you're not going to have the ability to present to new people. So we have to start looking at it from a technical point of view. How do we bring the younger generation into a new mindset of what SMTA has always been about, technical learning and networking. And so we also have to look at how do we encourage it from multiple points of view. I mean, younger staff and younger engineering people worldwide don't want to write a 17-page dissertation on something and then come to a trade show and hope to God that 34 people listen to it. What they want to do is they want to be able to talk about up and coming exciting things that they're doing, but not have to worry about necessarily that 17-page dissertation. So if they can have an avenue through SMTA that is not the standard technical paper anymore, that is a new way to bring in people that will be like, oh, hey, I can now talk about something, but I don't have to have 9 months worth of data that will be, checked by 74 people and hope to God that it's in fact blast. So that's one of the biggest
Mhm.
things that we have to do is then we also have to start looking at how is our international chapters performing because they're the ones that are doing really amazingly well. I.e. Mexico, Europe, and Asia are all starting to kind of grow legs and figure out how to become very successful. So we, the U.S. market, actually have to take the same approach that some of they are doing is that the non-standard approaches and figure out how do we get additional concepts or additional technology groups that have never been thought about coming to a trade show like SMTA. Maybe broaden out to a large box build mentality, or maybe bringing in robots or stuff like that, because those are all things that are amazing things that in fact would partnership really well with SMTA International and allow us to grow its sponsorship. I think we've always been depending on the same 300 to 400 people, and that's
Mhm.
fantastic. But their checkbooks get tired too. Their hands get tired of writing that same check over and over and over again. And so we now have to, again, start working with different groups and figuring out how can we form new alliances and become even stronger that way, because we've always been a core group of, machine guys and some material guys and maybe some process guys. But there's a lot more to our exciting electronic manufacturing than just that. We now have to start thinking about, the AI portion of it, which is the software. Maybe we need to start figuring out how we incorporate some of that stuff. How do we incorporate all kinds of machine learning tools? How do we do any of that stuff? Because that's where the money's going to be for sponsorships. Those are going to be where everybody's going to come in. I mean, when we were in Minnesota, it was great because we were with the medical group, but we didn't actually incorporate it as strongly as I think we could have. And I think if we would have actually taken it a little bit more, hey, we are a partnership, then we could have actually even made it more interesting with the medical folks to come down to our side instead of everybody from our area going down to the medical side. So it's looking at how do we reinvent ourselves, which is going to be important. The international groups, the non-standard organizations that are already out there, and then how do we take all of that and make it stronger and better? And that's where we're going to have somebody who's going to be willing to listen to other people's opinions, and we're also going to have somebody who's not afraid of the standard cookie cutter approach now being thrown away, because we've always done the same cookie cutter approach, which is we got, again, 300 to 400 vendors. Those are the guys we go after, and that's who we always stick with. Again, it's time to try a different cookie cutter or a different flavor. Maybe it's a
Well,
brownie time. You're telling.
Yeah, hey, I'm a brownie guy right here, man. You bring me brownies, I'll do whatever you want. And of course, in preparation for this, I shared some notes with you. We went through, I
Yep.
wrote about all these questions, and just as I expected, we're going to get one question in, and I'm going to throw all that to the side, and we're just going to have a fun conversation. But, let's dive in. Oh, man, you actually nailed so many good things right there, but I want to dive in deeper to a few of the points
Sure.
you made. Let's start with SMTAI, because with the SMTA, you have suppliers and users, right? Users are what grow the organization, but the suppliers, and I'm a supplier, we essentially fund the organization.
Yes, you do.
And with SMTAI, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone here,
You're not good at
but
me.
I'm a very opinionated person. That's how I broke into the industry.
Yeah.
But I like to share my ideas because I feel like it allows people to think differently. And this isn't just specific to SMTA. Trade shows are becoming less and less popular. Whether you go to IPC, I work in a few other industries, I go to their trade shows. The attendees are just not showing up.
Yeah.
Now, there is a lot of optimism with the show moving back to Chicago from Minneapolis. So fingers crossed there. But there's still quite a good amount of members of the SMTA that are just like, is it still worth going?
Oh, 100%. And I think what really people forget is that, I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot of gray hairs, myself included, in this
Mhm.
organization, and we love it, and we encourage it, and we all know that. But we have to look to the younger folks like yourself, and to do that, we have to start again thinking outside of the box. And outside of the box is, scary for a lot of people, because in the engineering world, as you know, it's full of type A personalities, and
Mhm.
everybody wants to be in control, and they like to have data and all that. And I don't disagree, but I also understand that when you are trying to learn and grow a organization, you have to look at, again, how do we encourage the younger participants to do that? Again, you approach it from how do we not have to worry about the long-term technical papers that they may or may not want to write, or how do we get them to present on something that they just spent a couple of weeks learning about and maybe having experiences about that. We have to be willing to now acknowledge that the younger engineering world is going to continue to push it forward. And so the more that we encourage that and encourage outside of the box mentality for everything, whether it's the local chapter show, the international show, whatever, that's what we have to encourage, because everything has been great for the last 40 years. I love it. But we're in the next 40. To do that, we got to continue to be broadening our strokes and figuring out how do we get the younger people involved. Again, how you get them involved, you give them data they want to hear. You give them information they want to hear. So you start bringing in things that we've never talked about. AI, not really. We've never really had stuff like that. We've never talked about long-term reliability stuff. We've never talked about, certain materials. You're a vendor that has some amazing products. We've never really focused on how do we work with, say companies that work and utilize, say router bits. I mean, everybody's like, oh, that's a very non-sexy topic. You're right, it's non-sexy, but there's a lot of people that do a lot of things with it, and we can learn a lot from that. So we have to be willing to step outside of ourselves and literally listen to what everybody is saying and actually take notes and take those notes and say, okay, how do we think we can make those into our own organization, and how do we make it stronger? Because when you stop taking notes, you become very shell-like, and once you're in the shell, you can never break out of it. And I don't know about you, but I love ice cream with that magic shell stuff on it where it gets nice and crispy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you got to break it up,
Dairy
right?
Queen.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
otherwise it's not that good. So we have to break the
That's a
shell.
great, what a good analogy. I'll throw a little, maybe I can edit in like a nice little
There you
ice
go.
cream cone emoji or
There you
something. But no, we're gonna keep it a little bit more professional with that. So, all right, a few things that you hit on. So I'm fortunate that I work with a company that has an international presence. So we attend both
Yep.
the Mexico SMTA shows, we attend some of the stuff over in Europe, and obviously, me personally, I attend almost every local chapter.
Yes.
And I'm currently here in Austin, and I'm trying to relaunch or regrow with my team here in Austin, the Austin chapter. How can we? This is a hard question because I don't want it to sound like we're begging for HQ to get more involved. But how can, just specific to the United States, how can we get more commonality or more consistency from or from local chapter show to local chapter show? I attend some and I'm like, I will be here every single year.
Yes.
I attend others and I go, that was a waste of money.
It's kind of a hybrid because my Heartland chapter for the last 2 years, we have not done an expo, but we have done the STAR event, which is Strategic Technology Advancement Research. And by the way, we have just announced we are going to be doing the STAR 2.1 version, I guess, at the end of July, because we had so many people willing to present on a topic. It wasn't papered, but it was just presenting on it. I didn't have enough bandwidth to tolerate 15 speakers. I could only put in 12. So we literally are having another adventure at the end of July. So I think what we need to do is you have those chapters that are really good at having expos. Let them have expos all day long. But if you have chapters like Austin, who is probably a really good chapter to have maybe your own version of a STAR event where you just have people present stuff. And you present, for half an hour, and everybody gets a half an hour, and you ask them questions or whatever. And then maybe share that with, whoever wants to be online, because like the STAR event that we're doing here at the end of July, it's free to whoever wants to join it. And so literally there's going to be 3 presenters. I'm actually going to do one on mentoring in the electronic industry, and it's free. So if we start opening up the other chapter events to be free with each other, then we can start to have that cross-pollination of ideas and thoughts and information, because that's one of the things that unfortunately has been very weird about SMTA, is that every chapter is kind of their own little creature, and that's great. But at one point, I mean, when you look again at the Mexico chapter, they're amazing. They share information in ways that I could have never thought possible. Well, again, let's do that. Let's start having opportunities where we have, maybe 5-minute clips from certain shows, and we can share at other venues or whatever. Or we have free events where multiple chapters, in fact, can have, cross-pollination and stuff like that, because that's where you're going to grow it. You're going to have people start to share ideas across the country. Because again, if you're only having the same 15 or 20 people come to an event, it's the same 15 or 20 people with the same mentality, and that's fine. But it doesn't give you new opportunities to think outside the box. So if we can figure out how to have maybe Austin pair up with like Heartland, or maybe with a California branch or somebody like that. Again, you're cross-pollinating, you're sharing, and that's what we need to do. Again, we've done it before. We actually did it a little bit in COVID, but then we started to forget about because everybody was like, oh, we can't do that anymore. We got to be in person. In person is great if you have a lot of time, but if you have the ability this virtual world has been amazing for as far as I'm concerned, because we can share. I can come home and I can come and maybe, listen to you guys present some stuff. and I don't have to try to figure out how am I going to get, my company to pay for me to come down to Austin, right? But we have to look at that. And we've been a little bit timid on that, but I think if we can start to have people like you lead that and literally have leaders that are not afraid to try something. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But guess what? We tried it, and that's okay. We learn from our mistakes and we keep going from that. And I think, there's going to be a very large demand for people like yourself with the ability to have the multimedia approach to allow everybody else to start understanding that. And that was meant to as a compliment because you really are a skilled craftsman at this. And so we have to use people like yourself as a craftsperson to help other chapters figure out how do they become successful. We always talk about, oh, we need to have a golf outing or we need to do that, we need to do that. No, we need to have communication with somebody else first before we even think about trying to do anything else like that.
Mhm.
You're a vendor, and I always feel bad when we have to panhandle for money from vendors, right? And that kind of always been the running joke is like, well, that's the organization and that's how it's structured. Well, yes, but we can also add additional structure formatting in and having cross pollination. Let's utilize people who've got technology. Let's figure out how to get stuff on social media. Let's figure out how all of this stuff can work together, because if you can share that information, wow, wouldn't that be fun to have multiple chapters start hearing that and then starting to ask more questions? Because when you ask more questions, you get more engagement. When you get more engagement, you literally will start to broaden people's thoughts and ideas and hopes. And I will guarantee you, again, like my star event, I had 12 people. My room was technically rated for 75 people. We had 77. We had 64 last year. And it was just because everybody loved the idea of not having to worry about a paper, but share something that's never been common or done or whatever. And I had so many people wanted to do this virtual online. I mean, again, we have to start using that. And so we're going to need people like you to help guide us down that path. Because I'm not going to lie to you, I am not a media savvy expert. But if I can ask you, Justin, say, hey, Justin, can you help us figure out how to do this as an organization? You're going to be like, sure, let me give you some ideas. I'm like, you know what? Then let's figure out how to do this, because there is no need for me to question it, but I already know you're good at it. So let's have you
Mhm.
figure out how to do all this stuff with us, and then get everybody else that is a younger engineering person, and they can probably do the same thing, and then let them learn too, and teach all of us old dogs how to do this stuff, because at the end of the day, you're the ones that are going to take this to a place I've never even comprehended when I started, right? And that's fantastic, because I see you guys coming into SMTA and learning and growing from, again, the international world because of all the travel that you do. But it's one of those things that if you're already learning that and you're willing to share it, guess what? I want to learn from you, because the more that we get more people involved, then that's how we're going to get other organizations to be part of this and want to, sponsor stuff and figure all this stuff out, because I don't want to have to keep panhandling the same 300 to 400 people, because eventually those checkbooks are going to run out. And so we have to find a new
Yep.
avenue.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So one question that's come up, and I might have sparked the debate, but I raised some eyebrows with it. And going back, you mentioned the Mexico chapter a few times, and they have a few shows per year. They don't have one in every major city, but they have a few. But
Yeah.
people travel to and far
Yes.
to those shows. And like they're all tabletop shows like what we have up here in the United States, but like the tabletop show that booth that I put up in any of the small Mexico chapters is glamorous compared to
Yes.
the tablecloth that I do here at every chapter. So a question I have is, do you think it's possible that the SMTA in the United States is becoming a little too saturated with all of the little local expos?
Oh, interesting question. I don't think we're saturated. I don't think we're utilizing our talents the way we could. Saturation would say that,
Okay.
you know, you would infer you have 100 chapters. I mean, technically we have, what is it, 28, 29 in the US. And, when you look at the Midwest as a whole, I mean, there's Heartland. That's not
Mhm.
saturated. That's not saturated. There's
No.
literally the closest one is Denver.
Here in Texas, we have 3 chapters now, and we're all trying to jockey for what weekend of the year can we do an expo. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm just throwing an idea out there for the purpose of this interview. Could Texas be better off having one big expo where companies put a lot of money into it and bring equipment, almost like a Guadalajara or a Querétaro, Mexico show, versus having 3 expos spread throughout the year?
I think yes. I think there really could be. I think if you actually looked
Just
at
thinking outside the box.
no, and that's a great question because again, that's always kind of been the running statement is that there's amazing chapters in Texas, amazing chapters in Florida, and they always seem to have these really great crowds. But it's like there's always at least one of the chapters that are in those 2 states that are always kind of just not as booming as the
Mm-hmm.
other ones, right? You know, again, I think if you have a conglomerate, that's a great thing. I think it's also, again, if you can start to organize, how do you use stuff virtually? Because, you and I both know that the running joke is a lot of things people don't come to these events because they don't want to travel more than an hour. And that's the
Yep.
truth. I've been involved with enough chapters with it, whether it's Wisconsin, Upper Midwest, Michigan, West Penn, and then now Heartland. And you even think about asking anybody to travel more than an hour. Oh my gosh, how dare you? But I think we also have to remember that with virtual stuff, we can do it now. So maybe you approach it with, a combined expo, but you also opportunity for those that want to come from a virtual point of view. So maybe they can't attend, and look at all the different, you know, retailers that are there trying to get them to buy stuff, but maybe they can at least attend some of the technical presentation virtually, and maybe, just maybe, because I would bet you probably have an avenue to do this, is if you were to do, say, a 20-minute walkthrough of the vendors that were at an event in a virtual situation. Now all the people that are doing virtual, guess what? They also got to see who was there, and maybe they needed to get a hold of somebody who can sell them router bits or stencil paper or anything like that. So I think there are some really great things that could be done as long as people are willing to do it. And I think we have to get to that point now because again, people are afraid of driving that hour. Well, guess what? Do it virtual. Log in. You're sitting in your home and go from there.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point because so much of this conversation and every conversation I have with any customer or any large company is there's a issue with employment. We need more engineers, but also at the shows, we need more people to attend. Now, yes, I am younger when you compare me to many of the other people in the industry, but I'm pushing 40. So a lot of the people that are in this industry that are coming in fresh are sometimes 17, 18 years younger than I am.
Yes.
And what I've noticed from a salesman approach, face-to-face sales is always wonderful. I'd love to be
Yeah.
able to come and talk with you as much as possible. But as you get younger in the generation, I spend more time texting young engineers on my phone now and
Yes.
doing video chats like this on my phone while I'm not driving, while I'm walking around. And it's become one of those things where the younger generation, they don't want to be face to face. It almost offends them.
Yes.
I've had engineers answer the phone like, "Why are you calling me? You could have texted me." So I'm wondering if, or I'm believing that you are onto a very strong point of creating that hybrid virtual / in person, so
Yes.
that you can attract those younger crowd. Because going to an expo, especially as a young engineer, can also be very intimidating
Oh, it's
because
horrible.
there's some really good sales guys out there.
Oh, it's horrible. And I try to bring, when I come to trade shows and I bring young engineers, you can see the fear in their eyes, and I get it. And so that's why I do try to, in fact, run point and say, okay, hey, let me introduce you to these people, because then that way I'm kind of acting as the, gatekeeper, right? But we're going to have to start thinking about this mindset too. Again, with the younger, I work with a lot of amazing younger engineers who, you're right, face to face or, phone calls they're kind of like, why are you doing that? You could just,
Yep.
send me some information by a text. And I get it. So that's when you have to take that approach again. And how do we start thinking about it from a virtual point of view? And maybe these events start having, okay, hey, we're going to have a special pricing for people that do just virtual networking, right? And you don't have to necessarily focus on trying to meet everybody, but you could do it virtually and say, oh, hey, this vendor happens to have stencil paper, and this is what I need because I'm needing to understand that. But what then you could have is when you're doing these events and doing something virtual is maybe have we actually did this 2 years in a row with SMTA International, where they actually had it set up so that you could kind of go into the call room or whatever they were, so you could go in and try to talk
Mhm.
to a vendor. Well, that got really clunky because we were trying to do too much at too much time. But if we did it in a small format where, again, maybe there's only 5 or 6 of you that are available, and right, and hey, somebody wants to come and, at least instant message with you about whatever, they can then do that without having to worry about, necessarily being right up and close and personal, and overcoming some of the nerves. But a lot of the time is, again, if you don't know anybody, you're not necessarily sure how to approach them, you're not sure how to talk to them, you're not sure how to do anything. And so I think, that there's this event coming in at SMTA International, with it's called the Champions event. And the Champions event is basically sponsors and their subject matter experts are supposed to then work with the younger engineering folks. I think we actually need to make it even stronger than that. I think what we need to do is we not only need to do that, but I think we need to have a virtual point of view for that, because then, we talk about younger staff members or number two members, but, as you just said, you're almost 40. Well, there's a lot of people that are coming into this industry that aren't 21 or 22 fresh out of college. They may have been doing something else, and all of a sudden realizing
Mhm.
that, because of the CHIPS Act and all this, there's now all of a sudden kind of money in this industry. Exactly.
That's
Well, so
me.
so guess what? Let's figure out, how do we make those people welcome too? Well, maybe we do it virtually, and maybe we have that avenue of letting them literally see a picture of you, and literally say, okay, you are an expert on this, this, and this. Cool. And if you really need to talk to them, great, let's do it. But it's there's so many hybrid approaches that I think we can take that we've been a little bit leery of, just because of, bandwidth and technology, and are some of the vendors willing to support it and all that. I think truthfully, there's a lot of vendors that if you give them the opportunity to have somebody like yourself work with them to have a hybrid system, oh, they'll jump over that all day. And again, that's what we
Mhm.
need. And we have to continue to push that envelope, because that's where we're going to grow our world and make stronger, newer engineers smarter, because they're going to be welcome in their own way. It's, the old school approaches of, oh, go to a local chapter and then, you know, you'll be a member right away. Well, you have probably been at enough chapter events where you see somebody fresh and new, and all of a sudden, like, the local chapter is pouncing on them like they're fresh meat. Well, that is going to scare every single person on this planet as soon as they are bombarded like that, and they're never going to come back. Well, that's not the right approach. But maybe if you knew that they were new and you just sent them, hey, my name is, Bill. Pleasure to meet you. Want to come over and say hi, and, let me just introduce myself or whatever, and just have a way of some sort of non-pressure, introduction, right? Whether it's virtual or in person. Boy, I bet you'd have a lot of people all of a sudden come back to that second event or that third event, and all of a sudden go,
Totally.
"Oh, what? There was no pressure," because they had an avenue. Maybe you have an RFID tag where you tag it, and again, you get to see a little bit, 2-minute video from you or a 2-minute video from me or whatever, and you can start scrolling it, and all of a sudden you see them and you're walking around and like, "Oh, hey, I just saw your 2-minute video. Cool. Let me introduce myself." Right? That's what we have to do. The world has become a world where we now have to understand the technology drives it. And the more that we encourage the technology and encourage the interaction from that technology, the more that the people are going to become involved. And again, the more the world is going to get involved. We can do it. We just have to realize that it's going to be unusual, and it's not going to be in our normal comfort zone. And guess what? Sometimes we have to step outside of our own comfort zone to become stronger. So that's what I would say.
So let's move the conversation a little bit forward
Sure.
more. Something that you mentioned a few times is, the SMTA is a networking event, and it does a lot of networking through education. Do you feel, or how do you feel about the thought that possibly some of our technical presentations are a little too niche, and some of the events are too much about the technical aspect and not enough about the fun networking aspect? Because where we are, most of us are here looking for friendship. And I've listened to one of your other interviews, and you nailed the point very well. Friendship, camaraderie, networking. But so many of these events I go to, and I'm like, I'm kind of just here to have a beer and make some friends. I don't want to learn about, this particular component.
Yeah, It's such a fine line, because I think the problem is that we really are driven by technical information, which is great. But we also have to understand that sometimes our audience doesn't want, PhD level stuff all the time. And we
Mhm.
and we have to understand that. So I think this is one of those, again, where it comes back to, we have to make hybrids, and we have to have, maybe you have one super high level, but then again, maybe, you and I go in and we talk about router bits and stencil paper or something, right? And something that people would sort of understand. And again, like, I'm bringing up a conversation about mentoring. Well, my mentorship is literally just talking. Let's talk about the problem. We're not going to come and solve everything today, but at least we can have a conversation about that stuff. So there's this has always been an amazing topic that everybody's afraid to approach, because everybody's wanting to have the most pristine technical papers and the most pristine presentations. I don't disagree. Those are great. I've read a lot of technical papers. I have no clue what they said. I literally walk away and I have no idea what I'm going. I don't know what I read.
Especially now with ChatGPT.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
Well,
But
hey, let before you go on, I want to hit
yep.
on something real quick before I forget. That is something that I've noticed the last few years as we get nearer and nearer to an event. There always seems to be a last minute rush and request for technical speakers and presenters. But I feel like, at least in my own experience, it's like, hey, I have a lot of stuff I feel like I can share and help people grow, but I don't want to write a paper every single time. I just want to get up stage and talk to you. I'd rather just do a video and post it on LinkedIn.
And I think we have to encourage that. And
Okay.
this is where I get really, really, man. I get the old guard. I admit, I get the old guard, and they try to browbeat me hard, because it's like, well, you got to have a formal paper. Why? Why do I have to have a formal paper?
I
How
haven't
is
met
that?
one writer in the industry. In fact, most of the papers I've read, I am very confident are ghost written by somebody else.
There's potential for that. We'll just say it that way. There is potential for that. I will just say it this way. I believe that if you can share information and you can put 3 or 4 slides together and you can share that information in 3 or 4 slides, do it. Because I would rather learn from the 3 or 4 slides that I actually can understand than 30 slides that I have no concept of what you just told me, because I didn't, have third level thermodynamics on a level that only 14 people in the entire globe attended for. I don't want that.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter to me. It means nothing to me. And so I think sometimes the chapters, and as the whole of the organization, has to start looking at what is being presented and say, is there value to this presentation? Or can we, in fact, if it's a formal paper and it's great. But if it's not so formal, but it's still informational, let's share that. Again, the more you do that, the more people are going to listen and more people are going to attend. And so I believe you do, in fact, have stuff that you could share. And that's why I've invited you for like next year already for my event, because I want you to be part of it,
Sure.
the presentation, because I want you to think about it, is that we're we're not wanting. I always tell people, I said, if you give me a standard stuff, I'm not even going to have you come. I don't want it. I want you to present something that's never been standard. I don't want anything that's normal. And I think we have to encourage that. And I know that sounds so eclectic, but that's what it is. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Is you've got so many amazing ideas. Why would I not encourage it? Let's encourage it. And we have to sometimes remind the chapters that, guess what? It's great to have the same 7 speakers all the time. And trust me, I know exactly the 7 that I'm thinking of. But I'm also thinking about, hey, let's bring you involved and have, maybe instead of a 30-minute or 45-minute on, the value of, modern media approach for our world, right? And I'll bet you what, there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna listen to, because they're gonna have to figure out, again, how do they work with the younger generation at their own workplace. And if they can at least have a communication point of view, then they're willing to share with it. So we have to overcome the fear of this virtual world we live in, or this new technology world. We build technology, but we're a little bit afraid of it. So we need
Yeah,
to, we do, we literally, we build the stuff,
it's
but we're
interesting.
we're a little bit of afraid of it. So it's time to stop being afraid and literally push, pull, and drag ourselves forward and accept and adopt the technology that we not only build, but we're creating. And let's figure out how to use it in a way we've never thought possible.
Well, one thing that I've voiced an opinion on often. And I think it's perfect for you and I to have this conversation because you mentioned your mentorship presentation. And,
Yep.
I've seen you come around. I love when you come to the trade shows or at least stop by my booth because you always bring, 5 or 6 young engineers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there are young engineers. It's so amazing. I always enjoy that when you come to the show. But, I think people sometimes think in our industry, because we're technology or electronics, that a technical presentation has to be built specifically to the production aspect of a board or an electronic device. But there's so much more. There's personal development, there's mentorship. Do you know what I believe is more valuable than anything else? Is how do I take this young engineer and turn them into a good employee, a better employee that can grow through the ranks? Do you have any plans as president to kind of transition more towards that mentoring, personal development side of
Yes.
things
Yes.
to not, I don't want to use the word groom, but really help these engineers progress their career as opposed to, oh, I just learned about solder paste.
Yes, because I've been doing it with my local chapter and my own people is that, we forget about the soft skills. I'm not going to lie to you. I can tell you how many young engineers come in have no concept of how to write an email. Literally, they have no concept of an email. Well, guess what? Your email says everything about what you're doing from my point of view, from a management point of view. So guess what? I'm going to want to know, can you write an email? And maybe we start bringing in the people that understand how to write email or how to literally develop a normal interaction in the workforce, because you meet a 1,000 people every day, Justin, and you see small companies and large companies and everything like that. But you also understand that there's one thing very much in particular, that we're not teaching any soft skills. We're not teaching any skills on how to write anything. We're not teaching them how to order capital equipment. We're not teaching them how to order, parts. Let's start focusing on that stuff too. That's all stuff that we've taken for granted, and we have to stop doing that. And it's all stuff that everybody needs to understand. And if you do, again, a 5-minute video of, oh, hey, when you're doing this, this is what you want to think about. Okay, cool. Guess what? You can now share that. Let's have that on, a cloud platform or something. So if you all of a sudden wanted to look up on how do I write a great email that's technical, guess what? You can pull up an email or the cloud and say, oh, here we go. So we have to start utilizing technology that allows us to share those soft skills, because the soft skills are actually what's going to make you a better employee. Because I don't care if you were, a PhD with 17 gold ribbons and you got whatever. If you can't tell me something in an email in 2 paragraphs, I'm not going to read it. If you write an entire dissertation in an email, guess what? I've got 34 seconds to read that email. That's all I got. But I average 300 emails in a day. So guess what? Tell me in 2 paragraphs what I need to know. So those are soft skills we have to teach. We also have to teach how to present. I'm not going to lie to you. You go to a lot of these events and you get a lot of the younger people, and they use the word. And if this was a drinking game, a lot of times we would all be so liquored up it's not even funny. And I say that
now that would make a fun SMTA event.
That'd be an interesting event. I'm not sure that would be good, but there are things, again, you have to have those kind of presentation that nobody thinks about. Like, oh, hey, by the way, don't use the word 7,482 times. I'm not going to be a fan of that. I'm not going to get what you're trying to tell me. Give me short, sweet, precise information. That's what I want, right? And these are all things that we can teach. These are all things we take for granted as a large company, small company, whatever. This is all stuff that can be taught. This is all stuff that literally, if they take an hour out of their day, shoot a video with you, we put it out on the cloud somewhere. Guess what? There it is. Whoever wants to call it up, you call it up for a chapter event. There it is. Done.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Well, there's that out of the box. You're defining that out of the box. You said that a few times, but now we're actually starting to define it. Like, let's invest in our membership. And then when you invest in the members and help create more employees, those companies, they're not afraid to write those checks anymore, because you're making them a better company by them sending their workforce to your events to learn how to become better employees. Because we do live in a world where all of the data is right here. We can learn everything we want. I love the SMTA because when I came in from the finance industry, I did a deep dive and a crash course on the SMTA website and read every paper I possibly could. And at the end of it, I felt like I had a PhD, but I needed to go see a PhD because I didn't understand anything I learned. But I want to flip gears again. We're gonna keep doing that. I think we're almost done here, but let's move on to something I want to talk about. So the SMTA is one of those events where once you're in and you're welcomed in by the board of directors and the main people that really drive the SMTA, once you're in there, the benefits are amazing. But when you're new, and maybe you're a competitor of someone that's on the board of directors, or you're trying to break your way in, not everyone's as vocal as I am or has the
Yeah.
personality to be able to, fight down a lot of the barriers and even the resistance that you could get. Do you feel that there is a need to open up from a leadership standpoint, the welcoming aspect of new
Yeah.
members and new leaders into the SMTA?
We have to. We have to because we are, you know, I'm going to use a weird analogy on it, but when you get so high up in the food chain, you start to forget who your people are that are providing the food chain, right? And at the end of the day, when you're, whether you're a chapter officer, board director, president or whatever, you're voted by the people, which is mean they're your boss, right? So we have to make sure that we, in fact, continue to remember that we work for them, which means we have to go out and say hello. My name is, right? And that, my own people will tell you that everybody out at the trade shows knows me, but you know what? I'm going out and saying hi, and I'm going out and saying hi, and I'm saying thank you because that's what I do. I have to, because at the end of the day, you're my customer. You really are. So if I remember that
Right.
you are my customer, and and I mean this from everybody's point of view, and there's a lot of people that forget this. Again, chapter level, national level, global level, it doesn't matter. Everybody has a customer, and our customer has to come first. So maybe instead of having a full day event for all the leadership team, maybe part of that is we take a couple hours and we literally go introduce ourselves to the floor and say, hey, let me introduce myself. How can I help you become whatever you feel we need to become? And I know that it's so not standard because it really isn't. People, it hasn't been that way for a long time. I get it. But I also get that, again, if I come out to you and I say, Justin, thank you for, ponying up money to have a booth here, I mean it, because guess what? At the end of the day, again, you're my customer. You're paying for what we do. So why should I not want to continue to encourage all of, chapter officers, global, all that to do the same thing? Because we have to remember, at the end of the day, this is all volunteer stuff, but we're still working for somebody, and you're my customer. So why not support the customer and encourage, how do we, work with the customer and make sure that I interact and give them the opportunity so that they have new engineering people come to them and start asking them questions about whatever, right? And so that way they can now focus on that and say, you know what, this is a good show because I at least had 3 new people come up and say hello, and again, that could all be driven by officers of every level. And it has to be. And that's one of the things I think we have to start driving to, is that we forgot that. We forgot who our customer is.
Mhm.
And it's time to
Yeah, I
come
mean,
back and say,
I've been to trade shows and events, and not just the SMTA, not just the SMTA. I'm not
yeah,
picking on them completely,
no.
but you go to some of these shows and you get a 20 by 30 booth. I mean, I've been with companies that spent $100,000 to go to these trade shows,
Mhm.
and the people that are putting on the event, you don't even see them. They're sitting in a room upstairs somewhere. So I think it's one of those things where you're absolutely right. Bringing the SMTA has such a wonderful motto about a global chapter on a local
Yeah.
level, and I think that's brilliant. And I think they've done a wonderful job embracing that. And I think under your leadership and the ideas you have, you can take that to the next level. One last thing I want to dive
Sure.
into, the number one issue we've touched on based on it briefly in the beginning of the call is employment, workforce. No one has employees. And if they do have an employee, well, the Tesla shop's going to open up down the street and they're going to take everyone for 25 cents more an hour. And then they're going to decide they don't like stand up desk, and they're going to go back to where they were. And they're just going to bounce around. The loyalty's not necessarily there, but um, what plan do you have to really improve the SMTA's job board or that aspect of it? I know there's been a lot of conversations about it, but I haven't really seen much action yet other than just a job, post your job here.
That's a really great question that I think a lot of people are, oh, hey, we'll just post a job and it will, people will come, right? I'm not going to lie to you. That doesn't work. That doesn't work in any way, shape, and form. But maybe again, if we're starting to use this hybrid approach and we start having companies, say, hey, we have a need for XYZ engineer, and maybe have an interview from an employee that's currently there to understand what's really going on. Because guess what? If I can hear directly from somebody who's actually living it, maybe I want to work there. You aren't wrong when you say, the Teslas and SpaceX and they offer a quarter more, and then all of a sudden people come over there and then they go back and whatever. But if they understand what they're going into, people tend to become very good loyal employees. And it's one of those things where I think we also have to approach it from, that same mindset when you're dealing with colleges and tech schools and stuff like that, because we have been, so driven in tunnel vision and say, oh, well, they have to have this particular degree and blah, blah, blah. But if you give them the opportunity to understand what are they actually coming into, you're going to get a lot of people that might have maybe a chemical engineering degree, but hey, you know what? I really learned a lot and I wanted to become part of, electronic manufacturing in some way, shape, or form. It's something like that we have to start thinking on, because putting it on a 3x5 card on a board that maybe 12 people are going to walk by and maybe 6 of those 12 are actually going to stop and look at and say, oh, well, this sort of maybe kind of could be fun. But maybe again do the hybrid and have, a little bit of, oh, hey, this is the company, this is the location, why do I want to move to, say, Austin? I mean, that's all stuff that people forget, right? And so we now have to we have to market our own approach to long-term employee retention and gathering better than just something on a job board, because the job board means nothing. It's just a HR description of something. But if you
Mm-hmm.
hear, from a process engineer who's telling you, oh, hey, I get to work with, cool new cell phones or new batteries or new whatever, and this is some of the work life I have. Oh my gosh, cool. That's awesome. You're going to have a whole lot more interaction, and you're going to have a lot more than 12 people stopping by to pay attention to. But they're going to want to look at the video and say, okay, that sounds really cool. So that's stuff that I think we could easily incorporate, especially considering, again, there's people like you who are amazing at this technology. Let's figure it out. Let's figure out how to make these employers that need these people have the opportunity to work with people like you to say, okay, we do 5 minutes, talk about the company for a minute, let's talk about the location, and let's talk about, what it really is. People will jump for it. I can't tell you how many young engineers are like, oh yeah, man, if I would have seen a video on this, I would have understood a little bit better this or what that is, or and that's what we have to do. And that's something that's easily done. We just have never done it. We just have to approach it new and think outside the box again.
Well, one thing to combat, and this is more specific to Austin, but I think it actually goes around other main cities. To combat the fact that there's just not enough employees to fill these advanced manufacturing roles. A lot of companies are now investing in partnerships with the technical colleges and
Yep.
the community college, and they would much rather bring in a green engineer who doesn't necessarily have that advanced PhD or that advanced degree
Correct.
and groom them the way they want them to work. And on the job training is exceptionally beneficial. What more can the SMTA do to strike those partnerships and motivate that advanced manufacturing within the technical colleges and the community colleges in the local areas?
That's been the million-dollar question for a long time, and I think part of the problem is that the argument is, oh well, we don't know who to contact, and it's always a transient. Well, any college you deal with, tech college or whatever, it's always transient. I mean, that's the nature of what they are, right? But again, I think if we start to focus on, I mean, there's some great stuff going on out in Phoenix that I know of. Brian Watson from Hybrid is doing some great stuff. There's some great stuff going on in Ohio. There's some good stuff in New York. It's those kind of stuff that we have to tap into and start sharing it as a whole. I mean, yes, it's always going to be hard to get a hold of an instructor or whatever at a technical college, because they're not going to be like, well, I don't see the benefit for me, so why do I want to take that time? The benefit is, if they really are looking at it long term, is that they're providing an opportunity for a younger generation to start interacting and growing and becoming even stronger. But that's really, if they're a really good person, then they're going to want to have the next generation learn it and not worry about, how am I going to get paid out of it. So we have to approach that from okay, we know that there are 3 areas that are doing really well. Let's figure out what they're doing. How do we get the other schools to at least buy into it and realize that there is money out there? There's a lot of money out there from the government to start figuring this stuff out. We just have to have people that are willing to be campaigned. And I know Tara with SMTA is really doing an amazing job. We're just going to have to give her more support because she's only one person, right? And so we're going to have to give her
Absolutely.
opportunity.
So let me ask you this. I grew up in the age where manufacturing became like a stigma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone associates manufacturing with like the hammer and the nail, walking out of the factory all covered in black coal, smoke, all that. But I mean, you walk into these facilities and they're pristine. I mean, it's state-of-the-art technology. The job paying is really, really good. Where can the SMTA help improve the thought process around manufacturing as a career?
Again, I think we have to start putting cloud formats out there of showing what real manufacturing is, because you're right. There is a lot of stigma of, oh, it's this, I'm going to get dirty. I'm going to tell you right now, in my facility, it's pretty clean. You're not walking on if you're walking on a dirty, you did something wrong. I'm going to tell you that right now. So it's something that we as an industry have to start realizing that we forgot about that. Like, again, the environment, what are you coming into? What are you actually going to be working in, right? Let's start sharing that with the world, because you and I've been to clean rooms, and I'll tell you what, a clean room, when you put the bunny suit on, is clean. You ain't walking out of there dirty. If you are, that whole lot's been
It's
contaminated.
too clean in my opinion.
But
well, okay,
it's stuff like that we have to get to.
Well, the challenge with that, and this is, I think we can kind of wrap the conversation up on this, because this is what it all comes down to. How do we pass that knowledge on properly to the next generation? Because there's plenty of people like you that are an open book, and I've retained this wealth, or knowledge and wealth. I've got it here and I want to give it out. But there's just as many that are like,
yes,
I'm the PhD. I'm not sharing this knowledge. If you want to learn, go learn on your own. And that scares people off. So under your leadership with the SMTA, what can we do to better encourage the sharing of knowledge, but also a better method to share that knowledge?
I think the sharing of knowledge, again, we come back to the hybrid approach. We have to focus on, okay, maybe you have a category for technical papers at SMT International, but maybe you have for non-standard, just presentation, and let that start to blossom and grow. And then I think we also have to start looking at it, just having round robin discussions where we're talking about real world thoughts and ideas, because if you can have a round robin discussion and have, some younger engineers maybe hear something about, maybe there's some machine issues that they've never thought about or heard about, and that we can have that discussion, right? And again, or maybe that discussion of, we're going to buy some sort of equipment and we have no idea. Those are all things we have to start sharing. And yes, there are always going to be those PhDs that are going to be sticklers in the mud, and this is mine and this is whatever. But if the rest of the world starts sharing like we should, and we're going to under my leadership, the PhDs will then become kind of that anomaly that maybe they're going to have to realize, hey, either I start sharing or nobody's going to talk to me anymore. And I, believe it or not, shame works. And I know that sounds horrible, but it really does. And the more that we can get everybody to start, again, outside box, then whoever it is, the PhDs, whatever, either they play well or they go away, and they literally will fade away. And that's okay.
Well, we'll wrap it up with this. Change is not a bad thing. It is a difficult thing. Nobody likes change. And the SMTA, the purpose of this conversation is not to make it appear like the SMTA is not doing a wonderful job. The SMTA is doing a wonderful job.
Fantastic job.
Yes. We have term limits. We have term limits in the SMTA. And fortunately, it opened up an opportunity for you to bring what you have to the SMTA by running as the president of the SMTA. And I think you're going to do a wonderful job. I think you bring a lot to the table. And outside the box, I think people want to hear that, because it is very easy to just do the same thing every time. And you're going to get met. If you are elected, you're going to get met with quite a bit of resistance.
I know I will. I know I will.
Are you prepared to handle that?
Yes. And I've had that asked a couple times now. And I said, here's what I will say. Bring it. Because at the end of the day, I'm not afraid. I will take my lumps and my bumps, but I'll prove it. I'll prove it works. Whether it's on a local chapter, like with the Heartland chapter or whatever, and start bringing it globally, I'll prove it. I'll bring the data. If they want data, I'll bring it. So I said, let's play. Because at the end of the day, I want us to continue to grow and develop, and the only way to do that is to think outside the box. So yes, there is going to be opposition in every way, shape, and form. I know that. I can already picture some of the key players that are going to do that. But I also understand that, again, sometimes you have to remind them that, if you're going to talk the talk about how we want to have members, well, then you have to be willing to either help fix the problem or get out of the way. And so I know that makes people nervous. That makes people like, oh, Bill, you're kind of wanting war. I'm not wanting war with anybody. But what I'm wanting people to realize is that we are a 40-year-old organization. If we want another 40, we either change or we don't. And if we don't, we won't make 40. We will not get another 40. I'll guarantee it. We just won't. And so we have to acknowledge the change that has to come. And if people are afraid, again, I'll have all kinds of conversations with them. I'm more than happy to have one-on-one with anybody and everybody. Because at the end of the day, I want another 40 years for SMTA, and the only way to do that is change. So,
well, that is a wonderful way to end this conversation. Bill, thank you very much for the opportunity to allow me to interview you. We will get this posted, we will get this shared, and I'm sure this is just going to spark a whole lot of more questions. But I do think you did a wonderful job letting people know that they can be comfortable in electing you as the president of the SMTA, and under your leadership, yes, there will be change. There will be unorthodox, outside the box thinking. But to sum it all up, it is only for the benefit of the SMTA.
correct.
Wonderful. That is how we will end. I will stop the recording
Okay.
if I can.
I give you credit. You did pull out some punches there, and I loved it.